Hello, my name is Dan Tempest, and today I'm going to be talking to you about COVID-19, the coronavirus. All right, so it's just some basics on the virus. The scientific name given by the World Health Organization is the coronavirus disease of 2019. It is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and it was first occurred on the Wuhan Peninsula in China in December of 2019. It is believed to have come from the animal market, and most scientists believe it came from bats in that Wuhan. And Dr. Zhang Zixan was the first doctor to report it. Just some on the taxonomy of COVID 19. SARS CoV 2 belongs to the same beta coronavirus group as SARS CoV and MERS CoV, which were prior viruses that had infected the world. SARS CoV 2 belongs to the sarbecovirus subgenus of the Coronaviridae family, which is distinct from SARS CoV. And just some other interesting information, more clues that it maybe came from bats. SARS-CoV-2 has about 87% to 96% of nucleotide sequence similarity to multiple strains of bat-like SARS coronaviruses. And they tend to be on that same lineage. Slightly different branches is what they're finding. So again, very similar to bat coronaviruses. So some background on the structure you can see in the image here. We have a good image of the structure. You can see the envelope, which would be the lipid bilayer here. We have the membrane spike protein, which would be right here. A membrane protein. We have a small envelope protein. We have the neocapsid, which surrounds the RNA. So to get into a little bit more information on the structure of the coronavirus, it is a spherical enveloped virus. It contains a single strand of RNA, approximately 26 to 32 kilobases in length. Their defining morphological feature are the spike-like projections that I mentioned, and this is actually what allows it to enter cells by its attachment to ACE2 receptors via that spike protein, and that was also a key usage in making of the vaccine for COVID. They mimicked this spike protein, and the COVID vaccine was an mRNA vaccine in most cases, and the mRNA essentially created that spike protein, which the body was then able to learn and hopefully combat. The neocapsid is a viral structural protein, and it plays an important role in viral replication. And the spike, again, is key for entry into cells. COVID-19 pathogenesis causes, this virus causes viral pneumonia in a lot of cases, and it really follows three key phases that I'm going to go through. So we have viral replication, immune hyperactivity. Key part of that is a cytokine storm. And then we have pulmonary destruction. One of the main cells that the COVID-19 virus infects is lung cells, but it's not only immune lung cells. So here we can see is when we have the cytokine storm, that would be during this immune hyperactivity. So I just want to start here on the left side, however, because this is when viral replication is occurring. So the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it affects cells through the spike protein, as I mentioned. So you can see these spike proteins around here, and this would be an ACE2 receptor that it is binding to. So that is how this coronavirus is gaining entry. Let me point that out. So here's our virus, and here would be our ACE2 receptor, this red. And again, here we have the virus entering that cell. And then it's going to trick the cell into expressing its genes, its RNA. So that would be right here. And that's going to essentially make a lot more of the virus. And then you're going to have release of that virus. The rest of this is then how does our body combat it? So one of the key cells that the SARS-CoV-2 virus impacts is macrophages, which would be a part of the innate immunity. And we see macrophages right here on this diagram. So macrophages are a key cell that present antigens to the outside. So maybe they would present that spike protein to the outside of the cell. And that's going to stimulate cytokine release. Now, this is, again, related to that cytokine storm here. So it also stimulates chemokines and proteases to be released. The real cells that are going to be highly impacted by this are those that have the ACE2 receptor. So this receptor is commonly expressed in the lungs, also in the heart. And when COVID-19 impacts heart cells, we tend to see a higher mortality rate in those individuals. It also is going to impact the renal and gastrointestinal tracts. So those are going to be, again, the main cells that COVID-19 has impacted. So as far as the acquired response that we're seeing over here, this would be the cell-mediated response and the humoral response. One of the things that will be the cytotoxic T cells will, again, contribute to that cytokine storm. But their job is going to be to kill antigen-presenting cells. You're seeing that right here. The humoral immunity are the B cells, and their main job is to create antibodies. And antibody proliferation is a key part of that acquired response, and would be commonly found with its spike protein. So that is what those T cells are looking for, that spike protein on the antigen-presenting cell. Again, hence that spike protein being utilized in the vaccination process as well. So that's the pathogenesis. Now it's epidemiology. So as mentioned, it was first reported on the Wuhan Peninsula in China. We see that in this right image here. Here we have China, and we can see how it proliferated. So we have here, way back here, December 31st. And we see it doesn't really start proliferating until into January. And that's when you started hearing on on the news broadcast, we started to hear about this new coronavirus, and immunologists and virologists were starting to be concerned. Couple key points that I want to show on the graph to the left here. Here we have, I put a couple stars on here. This in June of 2021 is when this star is, and that is when the Delta variant started to become a big thing. One of the reasons why we saw a little bit of a spike here was due to vaccines weren't as effective against this Delta variant. Another huge spike, the biggest spike of all right here, this is corresponding to the Omicron variant. So the Omicron variant became really dire in January of 2022. Very big problem. And one of the big deals with that was our vaccines were made for that first, our initial vaccines were made for that first variant. And so we had to alter, and as if people weren't always getting those boosters, they weren't always getting maybe that most updated vaccine to combat these new viruses or these new variants. If we look at the prevention of COVID-19, prevention, we heard a ton, right? Social distancing, wear your mask, get your vaccine were some big ideas. So what they found is with that mask, you're preventing transmission between individuals. So we see that both right here, the mask, and also in this image here. They also told us don't touch your face. That's an easy way to allow entry of that virus into your body. And they said wash your hands a lot. Use precaution in washing hands, proper washing techniques. They said social distancing, right? Make sure we stay at least 3 feet away from each other, 6 feet preferably. Avoiding contact if possible with many people. If you're sick, stay at home. Quarantines, we all heard about that. And then when the vaccines came out, it was highly um, recommended. Know your risk is another big one, though. Are you at risk? Were you maybe in a risk population? Have you had cancer? Are you overweight? Are you elderly? Were a lot of the things we kept hearing. So prevention was a big thing and really slowing that spread. And we heard about lowering the curve all the time when COVID first became a thing. There are some treatments that have been known. Now, these are admittedly, the research on them isn't huge at this time. We're still learning, but there are some things that we can use, such as antibody treatment. And you can get an antibody injection, which would be intravenous, usually in nature, and provide an individual with some antibodies. Very important to get that very early on in the onset, though, is what they found. There are some antiviral drugs which mostly inhibit viral development. They don't necessarily destroy the actual virus itself. Vaccine development was a big one as well. One of the most effective and preventative medications. You can also have plasma therapy, which is convalescent plasma antibody therapy. Again, administration early on can help and provide immediate immunity. And then we can also have blood purification. So this is could take care of inflammatory factors in the cytokine storm that I mentioned earlier with the immune system. It can also help with electrolyte imbalances and acid base imbalances that were relatively common with COVID-19 patients, especially when it was impacting the renal functioning. And then you can also have traditional complementary and alternative medicines that you can combine. Those would be like homeopathy and other natural medicinal mechanisms, things like herbs, acupuncture, and even massage was used. All right, so my journal article focused specifically on vaccine effectiveness. Um, and so it was done in a New York urgent care setting. So, just to give you a little background, first of all, as I mentioned, it was a study on vaccine effectiveness. One of the things they looked at was prior to the Delta variant, and its effectiveness was very high prior to that. But they also looked post it, and it was reduced a little bit. So that was one of the key findings. What they had was a retrospective study of individuals that were 12 or greater in age. And it was done in 2021 from April to October, again, in urgent care centers in New York. What they did to measure vaccine effectiveness was compare the odds of a positive test for a SARS-CoV-2 infection among vaccinated, partially vaccinated, and unvaccinated patients. And what they found was that vaccination effectiveness against symptomatic infection after 2 doses of the mRNA vaccine was 96% prior to the Delta variant and went down to about 82% post. And so I'm going to go through a little bit more on that. So this image here is part of the study, and what it did is it gave some background on the participants. So you can see they had almost 1 million patients that were eligible to receive the vaccine and got that COVID test during their time interval. And of those who had positive tests are about just under 40,000. And of those, for just 39,000, 13,000 of those roughly were fully vaccinated. 2,500 were partially vaccinated. But essentially, this is just a flow chart of the study participation of the participants in this New York City urgent care clinic. You can see most of the ones that tested positive are over on this side. The vast majority of the individuals are going to fall on this side. And again, these ones had the prior in. Oh, sorry. So we have not 930,000 of them were records at the time of testing, with almost 50,000 of them had prior infections of COVID-19. Our next image is going to be on vaccine effectiveness. So one of the things I noted in the background is they looked at pre-Delta versus post-Delta effectiveness. And you'll see quite obviously in this graph with the dotted line separating the two periods, the pre-Delta effectiveness is very high. And it just shows the importance of developing those new vaccines, those new boosters to help with these new variants that evolve. So the post Delta variant was lower, or the vaccine effectiveness was quite a bit lower post that Delta variant coming into play. It is important to point out that in this image, both symptomatic and asymptomatic infections were included, and this data was taken every 2 weeks. All right, then my last image from this study was on vaccine effectiveness of two different vaccines. So you can see here we have the Pfizer vaccine on the left and the Moderna vaccine on the right. And I put some stars again to point out a key part of this bar graph with this data on the left. So our Pfizer vaccine post-Delta is right here, and that was at about a 76% effectiveness, versus the Moderna was 82%, so a little bit more effective. Again, this would be post-Delta, and that would be post having two doses and having no prior infection. You can see having that prior infection in both the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine, you had that little bit higher effectiveness. And that would make sense, right? Because you have those memory cells formed by the adaptive immunity if you have that infection, because your body did learn that and is able to also help. So that would make sense as to why that prior infection, we see a higher vaccine effectiveness. It's just you have kind of that double-edged sword where you have the vaccine effectiveness, yes, but you probably also have some of that memory cell formation helping you out in that case. So some good information on vaccine effectiveness with COVID-19, specifically with the Pfizer and the Moderna. I know I got the Pfizer vaccine, and to my knowledge, I have never gotten COVID. I've gotten 2 sets of boosters now, too. To my knowledge, I have never gotten it yet. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation on COVID-19 and hopefully learn something new about the virus. I will point out my references. I'll move this bar here so you can see. I gotta go back so you can see them all. So I ended up with 11 references, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care.